Greetings and salutations, my fellow sovereigns. This is the Vocational Science of Freedom Wednesday night open roundtable, and we'll be doing a bit of a makeup class tonight. And I'll be covering a book which was given to me by a friend, and it's called The Great Taking by David Webb. And instead of going through the prologue, I will just get right into the meat of this particular book. The book is for download. You can grab it off of the Vocational Science of Freedom Gilded server. And if you'd like to join the Vocational Science of Freedom Gilded server, you can do so by going to either the Vocational Science of Freedom on Rumble, on Odyssey, or on YouTube. And the link is gilded.gg/VSOF. And it is also in all of the show notes for all of the classes on all of the platforms. So with that, I will open up the document that we have to read from tonight, which again is entitled The Great Taking. And I will just start reading from the introduction. Introduction. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Sun Tzu. What is this book about? It is about the taking of collateral. All of it. The end game of this globally synchronous debt accumulation supercycle, this is being executed by long-planned intelligent design, the audacity and scope of which is difficult for the mind to encompass. Included are the financial assets, all money on deposit at banks, all stocks and bonds, and hence all underlying property of all public corporations, including all inventories, plant and equipment, land, mineral deposits, inventions, and intellectual property. Privately owned personal and real property financed with any amount of debt will be similarly taken, as will the assets of privately owned businesses which have been financed with debt. If even partially successful, this will be the greatest conquest and subjugation in world history. We are now living within a hybrid war conducted almost entirely by deception, and thus designed to achieve war aims with little energy input. It is a war of conquest directed not against nation states, but against all of humanity. Private, closely held control of all central banks, and hence of all money creation, has allowed a very few people to control all political parties, governments, and intelligence agencies and their myriad front organizations. The armed forces, the police, the major corporations, and of course, the media. These very few people are the prime movers. Their plans are executed over decades. Their control is opaque. When George Soros said to me, quote, "You don't know what they can do," it was these people to whom he referred. Now, to be absolutely clear, it is these very few people who are hidden from you, who are behind this war against humanity. You may never know who they are. The people you are allowed to see are the hired face men and face women. They are expendable. And to make a pause here and a note, they are the Luciferian Khazarian mob. They are the ones whose families go all the way back to Rome, and even farther back, depending. And they are the ones who have set up and created all of the control systems throughout all of history, whether it be the cult of Rome, whether it be the Jesuits, whether it be the Masonic orders, all secret societies. That's who controls the world through subterfuge, because they have taken over all of the quote-unquote secret societies a long time ago. And they did so with the Illuminati, which is what was created by a man named Adam Weishaupt, who was instructed to do so by the Rothschilds. So those are those that they are talking about. So when George Soros says you don't know what they can do, well, that's who they are. So one might seek comfort in thinking that this must be crazy. Nothing like this has ever happened before, but it has. The precedent for intent, design, and horrific execution of such a plan to be found by examining the early 20th century, the period of the Great Wars and the Great Depression. The proclaimed Great Reset, now in progress, however, includes major innovations, which will now allow unprecedented concentration of wealth and power over humanity through deprivation. How might it come to pass that you will own nothing, as so boldly predicted by the World Economic Forum? It certainly is not about the personal convenience of renting. With the collapse of each financial bubble and the ensuing financial crisis, a story is rolled out which should now be familiar to you. It goes like this. All of us are at fault. We just wanted too much, and we were living beyond our means. And now, our collective greed has caused this terrible global crisis. The quote-unquote authorities, the quote-unquote regulators, had struggled mightily to protect us from our own quote-unquote animal spirits. Their great and elaborate efforts having been demonstrated through decades of work. Despite their good intentions, however, they failed, and can't be blamed or prosecuted for that. After all, we are all to blame. In any case, let's look forward. The financial system must be restarted so that we can provide credit to you again, create jobs, and get the economy growing, whatever it takes. This time, what it will take is all of your property, or what you thought was your property. Here's your central bank digital currency deposit on your smartphone so that you can go buy milk. Money is an extremely efficient control system. People order themselves upon money incentives, and thus, difficult, dangerous, and energy-intensive overt physical control need not be employed broadly. But the money control system breaks down at the end of a monetary supercycle, with collapse in the velocity of money, velocity or VOM. This is a multi-decade process. And I'm going to pause here. The reason it is a multi-decade process is because the Khazarian mob creates money out of nothing. If we, the American people, threw them out of our country once and for all, and actually followed the Constitution, particularly Article 1, Section 10, which states that no state shall make anything but gold and silver a tender in payment of debt. You can't print gold and silver out of nothing. And so therefore, this velocity of money, or VOM, has no place in an economy that's actually running off of gold and silver. But I continue. Velocity is the number of times that a unit of currency is spent to buy goods and services in a period of time. This is measured by comparing the value of all goods and services produced in a period of time, gross domestic product, or GDP, which is the value of all cash and deposits which can be used nearly as easily as cash, meaning the money supply. So, an equation. Velocity equals GDP divided by the money supply. Thus, velocity times the money supply equals GDP. Lower velocity results in lower GDP. Milton Friedman, who no one should put on a pedestal, was an economist noted for the study of monetary history. In his book, Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960, co-authored with Anna Schwartz, we find the following observation. We know enough to demonstrate rather conclusively that velocity of money must have declined sharply from 1880 to World War I. I wonder why that happened. Could it have been something called, the Federal Reserve System? Yeah. Collapse in VOM is exactly what was unfolding from the 19th century and leading up to the Great War, meaning First World War. Within a few years, the Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires ceased to exist, as did the Qing dynasty. The German economy was destroyed. Then followed the Great Depression. The Second World War and the slow collapse of the British Empire. No populations were unscathed. There were no winners. Or were there? While there was widespread deprivation, selecting bank interests took the collateral of the thousands of banks which were forced to close, as well as a great many people and businesses, large and small. The indebted. The indebted to who? The Khazarian mob. In the U.S., gold held by the public was confiscated. And that, just in case anybody doesn't know, was by executive order of Roosevelt. And guess what? He demanded that all gold be turned in by May 1st. May 1st. Interesting date. Anybody that ever studies the occult might know May 1st, or May Day, is the highest Luciferian holiday that exists. Surprise, surprise that they put the little cap on it on that date. The stealing of all the American wealth. But I continue. But most importantly, closed-held, secretive private control of central banks and money creation was maintained, as was the aforementioned control over society's key institutions, including political parties, governments, intelligence agencies, armed forces, police, major corporations, and media. And one of the other most important ones that he didn't mention, which is the school system. The Prussian education system came in and ran over everybody. No one had the capacity to learn what the evil ones were doing because you never, ever got a proper education. You never got a liberal education. And I don't mean liberal from a standpoint of left wing. I mean liberal from a standpoint of what the word means, which comes from the Latin word liber, which is where we get the word liberty and where you get the word library. A library means book in Latin. And to have a liberal education means that you understand grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which is called the trivium. And grammar is the who, what, when, where situation. So that's your grammar. And then your logic is your why it happened. And then your rhetoric is your capacity to argue the who, what, when, where, and why, which is then basically stating the how of whatever happened. But without the trivium, without learning the trivium, you have very little hope of any intellectual self-defense, whether it be listening to a radio show, whether it be listening to a commercial, whether it be watching some stupid television show or some idiot talking head that they control telling you what you need to know, what you should pay attention to, or even literally being literate. The capacity for reading, the ability to read, does not auto-magically give someone wisdom. In fact, truth be told, the capacity of being literate is just another way of controlling the masses if those masses have no capacity of self-reliance and autodidactic thinking, particularly in the trivium. And so I think it's kind of a great oversight that this author missed the educational system, but I'll continue. The heirs to this control position have known for many decades that such a collapse in VOM would come again. They have been preparing. For them, it is an absolute imperative to remain in control through the collapse and the Great Reset. Otherwise, they risk being discovered, investigated, and prosecuted. Kind of like how they all should have been completely discovered, investigated, and prosecuted, and, might I add, executed during our revolution. But instead, we kind of gave them a pass and we kind of said, okay, we're going to make some peace treaties, and they kind of stuck around. No, they should have been exiled. All of them should have been sent back to England or wherever the hell else they came from. But I digress. Back to it. They are not doing this for us. There is no noble purpose. We are now living within a replay of this monetary phenomenon, i.e., a profound decline in VOM, which began when velocity peaked in 1997. This was coincidence with onset of a major global financial crisis, known as the Asian financial crisis. It was then followed, within a few years, by the dot-com bubble and bust. Throughout this period, I was managing long and short-term equity hedge funds, and I developed the insight that the Federal Reserve was influencing the director of financial markets. This was considered conspiracy theory, even by my partners. At that time, it was done through open market operations conducted by the New York Fed using repurchase agreements on Treasury securities. Okay, I could delve deeper into that, but I won't. Because my background also came from an aspect of dealing with the financial world, because I personally used to be a personal financial advisor for a division of Citigroup. And I'm well aware how all of this shit happens. And I'm well aware of how their little Ponzi schemes and what they do is always meant to do one thing, which is to make sure that the eventual collateral, whatever the person puts forward to get their loan from a bank, always ends up going back to the bank. That's the whole purpose of this entire Ponzi scheme called banking. It's so that the banks will eventually end up with all of the collateral. To continue, I began systematically following the rate of growth in M3. That's the aspect of the money supply, the broadest measure of money at the time, which is no longer published. Surprise, surprise. I studied what was unfolding incrementally, and I saw that in individual weeks, new money created was more than 1% of annual GDP. This was when it first occurred to me that the Fed was getting less bang for the buck, and that GDP was not responding to money creation. This meant that the velocity of money was inverting, and that money growth was now much higher than any GDP growth. The money being created was not going into the real economy, but was driving a financial bubble with no relationship to underlying economic activity. Right. I understood this, not without hindsight, but in near real time, which is exactly how I was experiencing it as well. Not precisely at these same times of 1987. My time came a little bit later, but I was still witnessing the same thing. I got to witness it through the housing debacle. And there's a great movie called The Big Short, which everybody should go watch. You should easily download it in a lot of different places. And it's a really good movie, even though it is Hollywood made. But it really does give a good sense of what the fuck they thought they were doing and how bad it actually was. And the fact that they planned the whole thing. Greenspan and his morons planned everything that they were doing. It was a way for them to consolidate more power. And that was the one that I witnessed firsthand. To continue, if I could know it, Alan Greenspan and the people he worked for knew it too. So why did they do it? If something does not make sense, it is necessary to change one's perspective and aim for a larger understanding. Crises do not occur by accident. They are induced intentionally and used to consolidate power and to put in place provisions for measures that will be used later. By the fourth quarter of 1999, when the dot-com bubble was reaching extremes, I saw that the money supply was being increased at more than a 40% annual rate. I understood then that the velocity of money was collapsing. Such a collapse occurs when the economy is not growing, despite very high rates of money creation. Please observe the extremely important chart in Figure 1.1, which you can see, which was prepared by Hoisington Management. For once, we can see a true underlying determinant of the sweep of history. Profound decline in VOM led to the financial panic of 1907, which was used to justify the establishment of the Federal Reserve System, a completely unlawful, unconstitutional entity that has never had any constitutional existence. We vested, but let's talk proper law here. We, the people, vested Congress with the power to create money and determine the value thereof, meaning gold and silver of the aspect of what that is. And to coin it and say this will be called a dollar, meaning a dollar is an amount of weight of silver, not meaning a Federal Reserve note, which is a debt instrument. Two entirely different things. Now, where in the Constitution did we ever vest the power to Congress to vest that power vested only to them to someone else? The answer, it doesn't exist. So the Federal Reserve and all the Khazarian mob are committing treason by stealing from the totality of the republics, all of them. They could be held in treason against Iowa. They could be held in treason against New York. And they could be held for treason against the United States as a whole. So make no mistake about that. Nothing that they have ever done is constitutional. They're just continuing to do it because we don't hang them. Plain and simple, honestly. But anyway, get off my high horse here and get back to reading. The Federal Reserve Act was passed by Congress in the quiet days before Christmas, 1933. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated 6 months later. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the man that got whacked to start off World War I. He was the cousin of, I believe, Queen Victoria at the time, and he was also related to pretty much all the rest of the ruling families in Europe. And he was also the heir to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. A little back history there. I'll read the figure one information here. Annual velocity of money from 1900 to the first quarter of 2021. Digitized from a plot published by Hoisington Management. Data sources stated in the original Federal Reserve Board, Bureau of AUF, I don't know what that is, Economic Analysis, Bureau of the Census, the American Business Cycle, Gordon, Blake, and Romer. So we have this nice little jumpy jump and bouncy, and we're just creating and destroying money however we feel like here. Why? What is this? Why is this thing going all over the place? Well, that's because the Fed says, oh, we want to boost. So we're going to boost this up and we're going to make money. This was called right here, what? The Roaring 20s. And then wham, we have it. We're going to Great Depression. Oh, no. Right. So this was their depression of what they did to destroy the economy until they said, oh, we're going to bring in the Federal Reserve. Now we're going to take all of the assets that we took in the Great Depression where we bought up everything. And then we're going to skyrocket it so that we can buy up even more. And then we're going to plunge it again. So then somewhere in here, like way down here, this is where we steal everybody's gold. 1933, right here. Look familiar? The bottom of this one. This is where they stole everybody's gold. This is where the Jesuits took everything. The Khazarian mob took everything. And yes, I'm putting them both in the same bucket because they're all of the same ilk and they're all worked together. So, but back to this anyway. All right. So following recovery in VOM during the Great War, World War I, it collapsed further, leading to the closure of banks and the confiscation of gold in 1933, which is what I just stated. VOM recovered somewhat in the Second World War and then collapsed to a low in 1946, right here. Unprecedented low until now, over here. VOM has now concentrated to a lower level than any point during the Great Depression and World Wars. Once the ability to produce growth by printing money has been exhausted, creating more money will not help. It is pushing on a string. The phenomenon is irreversible. Right. As is the collapse of every single fiat currency that's ever been tried in the entire history of mankind. It is a mathematical fucking certainty. And they know this. But they know it in the standpoint that they manipulate it, that they can sell everything up here and buy everything down here. Everything is man-made. Everything is created. The cycles are manipulated. But the cycles can only be manipulated because they only bounce so many times until the entire money supply snaps in half. Because all fiat currency is an exponential curve. And an exponential curve would be like this. It goes and it grows and it grows, and all of a sudden it turns a corner and it just takes off right off the bloody chart. Well, that's what's happened. So this is an aspect that the money supply is now somewhere to the moon as far as a chart is concerned. So the phenomenon is irreversible, and so perhaps the announcement of the Great Reset has been motivated not by global warming, another lie, or by profound insights into a fourth industrial revolution, but rather by certain knowledge of the collapse of this fundamental monetary phenomenon, the implications of which extend far beyond economics. Something has been planned for us, but not for the reasons you have been given. How might we come to know something about the intentions of the planners? Perhaps by examining their preparations. Dematerialization. Chapter 2. All warfare is based on deception. Sun Tzu. There are now no property rights to securities held in book entry form in any jurisdiction globally. I want to reread that again, just to get your head wrapped around that. There are now no property rights to securities held in book entry form in any jurisdiction globally. Anybody want to know why that is? One name of one company. The Depository Trust and Clearing Company, the DTCC. There are no property rights in securities held in book entry form in any jurisdiction globally. None. Why? Because you can't actually get the actual certificates anymore. You used to. There was a time where you owned stock, you could actually get the certificates of stock. No, that doesn't happen any longer. They're held in what's called book entry form. Now, why are there no property rights to securities held in book entry form in any jurisdiction globally? It's because of everything of what all of you have learned here at the Vocational Science of Freedom. It's because this entire system is based upon presumptions, particularly the presumption that we're all infants and dead to the law. Because infants cannot hold title. So if an infant cannot hold title, but yet that's how they see you, how can you possibly be able to be allowed to hold an actual stock certificate? Because what is an actual stock certificate? It's a part of the title of the company. Sorry, you're an infant. You can't have that, right? Just like you can't have your actual car title, which is the MCO. Just like you can't have your actual title to say a rifle that was built and sold by whatever rifle company you want to buy it from. Just like none of us ever come back and claim our estates. Just like the title to us is the actual authenticated birth certificate, both on the state and federal level, that then you must properly endorse. That is the proper title to you. There's a copy of it sitting in the DTCC, but once you make proper claim to it, it's now yours. And that's what nobody's doing. This sentence is all about title. Now, he's not telling you this, but I'm telling you this because he's true. What he says there is true, but no one bothers to realize why it's true because no one's going to go deep enough into understanding of the law to let any of you know what's going on. Because truth be told, at this point, I don't even know how many judges or even attorneys or even law professors even actually fully understand the totality of this system. How far it goes back, how it started, how far the war has come, the ups and downs of the war, particularly in English jurisprudence, between the ecclesiastics, the civilists, and the common law. They don't know. They don't know. They don't care. And their masters are never going to tell them. Why would they? They think their system's perfect. They think everybody's stupid. No one's going to ever figure this out, right? As Mandel Edward House said. And if one man in a million could figure it out, we will have what? Plausible deniability? Sorry, fuckers, that doesn't count anymore. Because I know. And if I know, then everybody else that I know is going to know. Because I can prove it. Anyway, to continue. In the grand scheme to confiscate all collateral, dematerialization of securities was the essential first step. The planning and efforts began over half a century ago. That there was some great strategic purpose behind dematerialization is evidenced by the fact that the CIA was assigned the mission. The project leader was William Bill Denzer, Jr., a career CIA operative. By his admission in his own written memoir, he started his career working to establish anti-communist student organizations in Europe with the backing of the CIA. The CIA had arranged his draft deferment. He was then specifically assigned to the CIA and worked there openly for 5 years. Subsequently, he was transferred from the CIA to the task force which he created, the Agency for International Development. He became special assistant to the first head of the AID and therefore special assistant to the U.S. coordinator of the Alliance for Progress, which was active in Latin America. He was then appointed executive secretary of the Clay Committee, which lobbied for congressional appropriations for AID. 3 years as director of AID in Peru, he was named deputy assistant ambassador to the Organization of American States. By the way, if you don't know what that is or where that is, I'll let you do your own research as to what the Organization of American States. I will just leave it at that. Go do some research, and you will be surprised what that dirty little thing is. He states in his memoir, given events in the United States in the late 1960s, including the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, both done by the CIA, my interest had been to shift from the international to the domestic front. Then, strangely, even though he had no background in any aspect of banking or finance, he was appointed to New York State Superintendent of Banks by Nelson Rockefeller. This came after the nomination to the newly formed New York State Council of Economic Advisors by its chairman, former head of the World Bank, Eugene Black. Interestingly, Black's father had been chairman of the Federal Reserve in 1933. Within 2 years of assuming his position as New York State Bank Superintendent, Denzer was named chairman and CEO of the newly formed Depository Trust Company, the DTC. Starting to see it now? A post he held for the next 22 years, i.e. through the entire process of dematerialization, which is where the DTCC says, no, infants, you don't get to have the actual stocks. Sorry. In the late 1960s, something called the Banking and Securities Industry Committee, BASIC, had been formed to find a solution to the paperwork crisis. Oh no, there's too much paper in Wall Street. I don't know what to do. I guess you can't have your stock certificates anymore. It seemed the burdens of handling physical stock certificates had suddenly become too great, so much that the New York Stock Exchange had suspended trading some days. Quote-unquote lawmakers, then urged the government to step into the process. This was all known. This was all a process of taking away the capacity to hold the stock. Do you understand that? Everybody needs to get this through their head. There was nothing magical about this, and there was no actual problem with people actually holding their own stocks. No, that had nothing to do with it. Had to do with, we don't want the infants to hold title to anything. Right? The BASIC report recommended changing from processing physical stock certificates to book entry transfers of ownership via computerized entries in a trust company that would hold the underlying certificates immobilized. Right? Where'd they go? Oh, the DTCC has them. Oh, why can't I have them? Well, they have them. Well, I want them. Too bad. What? I paid for it. Sorry, infant, you don't get it. This trust company would develop the necessary computer and other systems. I happened to meet with network engineers of DTC 40 years ago in my first job out of school. Was this quote-unquote paperwork crisis manufactured in order to provide an imperative for dematerialization? You bet. Consider that DTC did not begin operations until 1973 and that no significant degree of dematerialization was achieved for many years. However, somehow, during this intervening period, stock exchanges continue to function in spite of escalating trade volumes without the elimination for certificates. Right. Especially with the aid of computerization, it could be done and was done. DTC eventually became the model for the Central Securities Depository, CSD, and Central Clearing Counterparty, CCP. Interesting name. The purposes of which will be explained later. Security Entitlement, Chapter 3. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. Niccolo Machiavelli. The greatest subjugation in world history will have been made possible by the invention of a construct, a subterfuge, a lie, the security entitlement. Since their beginnings more than 4 centuries ago, tradable financial instruments were recognized under law everywhere as personal property. Perhaps that is why they were called securities. It may come as a shock to you that this is no longer the case. In order to convey to you what has been done, let me start with an analogy. Let's say you have purchased an automobile for cash. Having no debt against the vehicle, you believe that you now own it outright. Despite that, the auto dealer has been allowed by a newly invented legal concept to treat your car as his asset and to use it as collateral to borrow money for his own purposes. Now, the auto dealer has become bankrupt, and your vehicle, along with all the others sold by the dealer, are seized by certain secured creditors of the dealership, with no judicial review being necessary, as legal certainty was previously established that they have absolute power to take your car in the event of bankruptcy of the dealer. Now, to be clear, I am not talking about your car. I am illustrating the horror and simplicity of the lie. You are led to believe that you own something, but someone else secretly controls it as collateral, period. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second, because strangely enough, I don't know if he meant this as a joke, but that is eerily close to what is actually going on with your car title anyway. I don't know if he meant to put that in there as a, hey, by the way, they do this too. But everybody who's learned here is well aware of the fact of what the MSO actually is. And what the MSO, what happens, or sorry, the MCO, Manufacturer's Certificate of Origin. What happens with the Manufacturer's Certificate of Origin is it gets faxed off to or sent off to the corporate state of which you present a driver's license because you're a fucking infant and you don't get to have the title. So it gets sent to the corporate state then controls it. They then put it onto a digital record and they destroy the original. They shred it. Now you can't get the original. Now the actual title has disappeared. Poof, it's gone. What do they give to you? Oh, they tell you to go to a title company and get a certificate of title. Okay. Is the certificate of title the title? No, it's not. The certificate of title lets you use the thing, which now makes you something in law, which is a very long word. It's called a usufructuary. It means you have the right to use the thing, but you do not own the thing. Because they split the title, which is what Roman civil law does. It splits the title between a legal title and an equitable title. Equitable title means the infant can go use it, but the one who actually has the legal title is the one who actually owns it. That's why they tell you that you got to put your seatbelt on, little baby, and you can't drive over 55 miles an hour. Oh, and by the way, you have to insure it with your own money because it's not yours. It's ours. Right? So as someone recently said, I think it was literally today on the main chat in the VSOF Gilded server, that they had been arrested, and they told them flat out, I don't have any contracts with the corporate state. And then the cop said, I'm going to arrest you just like the last guy who just talk like that. Guess what? He didn't get arrested, but guess what? They took his car. Why? Because they couldn't touch him because he told them, you don't have any jurisdiction. I don't have any contracts with you. But the cop knew that there was a contract regarding the car because what? Because he didn't present him with the MCO. If the man would have presented him with the MCO along with those words and to fuck off, he couldn't have taken the car either. But therein lies the problem. Title, right? So anyway, I don't know if he put that in there on purpose, but just very interesting analogy. I think he might be trying to tell you guys something. We'll just continue on here. Okay, you are led to believe that you own something, but someone else secretly controls it as collateral. And they have now established legal certainty that they have absolute power to take it immediately in the event of insolvency. And not your insolvency, but insolvency of the people who secretly gave them your property as collateral. It does not seem possible. But this is exactly what has been done with all tradable financial instruments globally. The proof of this is absolutely irrefutable. This is wired to go now. Essentially, all securities owned by the public in custodial accounts, pension plans, and investment funds are now encumbered as collateral underpinning the derivatives complex, which is so large, an order of magnitude greater than the entire global economy, that there is not enough of anything in the world to back it. I'm going to read that again because it's a mathematical certainty and most people don't even know what the hell what I just read. Essentially, all securities owned, quote unquote owned, by the public in custodial accounts, meaning custodian. It's not yours, it's somebody else's. Pension plans and investment funds are now encumbered as collateral underpinning the derivatives complex. Now, hopefully you'll probably explain what the derivatives complex is because I really don't want to get into it, which is so large, an order of magnitude greater than the entire world economy, that there is not enough of anything in the world to back it. This is global casino. They've turned the world into a global casino. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's all a scheme. A scheme that they control everything. And you control nothing. Meaning you don't have title because, again, you're an infant. So, the illusion of collateral backing is facilitated by a daisy chain of hypothecation and rehypothecation in which the same underlying collateral is reused many times over by a series of secured creditors. Okay, so we kind of just explained it, but that's a lot of jargon to get into your head if you don't understand banking. And so it is these creditors who understand this system, who have demanded even more access to client assets as collateral. Right, because like I said, everything is just one big giant casino. It is now assured that in the implosion of, quote unquote, the everything bubble, collateral will be swept up on a vast scale. The plumbing to do this is in place. Legal certainty has been established that the collateral can be taken immediately and without judicial review by entities described in court documents as, quote unquote, the protected class. Well, what it really comes down to is contract. You went and got a bank account. Did you bother to read the contract? I bet you didn't. I bet you 99% of the people that went and got a bank account didn't read the contract. I bet 99% of the people didn't even know there was a contract associated with it. Well, you might want to go read that fucking thing because I can guarantee you that it says in it that they can bail in their protected class, meaning the money that you have in a bank is not your money. Not that it really ever was anyway, because it was always just bookkeeping entry, which was clearly laid out and anybody can go read in Modern Money Mechanics, which is the book that Jerome Daly used to smash them upside the head with in the Jerome Daly case, also known as the Credit River decision, where a jury decided, and it was proved, that Federal Reserve notes have no lawful consideration. Okay, what does that mean? It means if I don't give you lawful consideration for a contract, that voids the contract. Any contract. Kind of comes up with a problem there, doesn't it? Use Federal Reserve notes, you void a contract? Right. So, needless to say, the judge in that case and many of the jury members were executed by the Khazarian mob. Doesn't change the fact that they were right. Doesn't change the fact that the court case exists. And it doesn't change the fact that Federal Reserve notes have no lawful consideration because they're not backed by anything. They're bookkeeping entry. There was a time where they were backed by gold and silver, but not anymore. So the second that happened, which was literally when Nixon dropped the gold standard, is instantaneously when Jerome Daly, who happened to be an attorney, realized what he had done. He said, oh, you want to play this game, huh? Okay. I put my house up as collateral. What did the bank put up? Answer? Nothing. Kind of creates a problem there, doesn't it? So what did these cocksuckers feel like they had now the necessity to do? Just steal everything. Take everything. It's a double-edged sword here. If the dollar has Federal Reserve note. If the Federal Reserve note, it cannot be seen as having any lawful consideration. Okay. Can you buy a stock with it? Answer, technically, no. Okay. So in a weird sense, and I always tell people this and they never believe me, in a weird sense, they're following law, sort of. Because they're saying, well, if it doesn't have any consideration, which is what Jerome Daly case said, well, what did the DTC have to do? They basically had to hold everything until what? Until lawful consideration could be given for the exchange of the actual title. I mean, you really do want to think about it that way as well. I mean, was this all manipulation and did they do this on purpose? Of course they did. But I'm just saying they always have that aspect, or at least they try and continue that aspect of plausible deniability, as was stated by House. Well, why? Well, we all know that we'll all kill them for what they've done. But in a sense, they are following law. But what we have to do is do the same thing and just take it all back. Okay? Which is what the VSOF is all about. But anyway, do continue. Even sophisticated professional investors who were assured that their securities are segregated, quote unquote, will not be protected. An enormous amount of sophisticated planning and implementation was sustained over decades with the purpose of subverting property rights in just this way. It began in the United States by amending the Uniform Commercial Code in all 50 states. Surprise, surprise, that's where it starts. That's why the Vocational Science of Freedom does not teach anybody to use the fucking UCC. Okay? It is a trap created by them. The whole entire system is a trap because that's the law merchant. And the law merchant is literally the Khazarian mob's law. You can get into what the law merchant is. I've done plenty of classes on it. But if you really want to get deep into it, understand that learn about what the fair courts were. And I don't mean fair as in being equitable. Learn about what the fair courts, like particularly the fair court of St. Ides. Think of fair as like a county fair. Okay, let's put it that way. Go read about the fair court of St. Ides. Understand that the law merchant, the merchants, the merchants, mer meaning water, those that chant. So one that chant their law from the sea, the merchants, they brought their maritime amnesty law onto the land through the fair court of St. Ides and other fair courts in England. That's how they got their proverbial foot in the door, or at least their toe in the door, right? And then all of a sudden, then the common law courts had to deal with them. Well, we're still dealing with them. Well, they need to all be executed immediately. And because they're all thieves. And first time offense under common law, sorry fuckers, is death. That's what the common law says. You hang a thief. They don't like that. I wonder why. Because that's the law. Well, what are they doing? They're stealing everything if you would but wake the fuck up and claim it. But no one's doing that. You don't make a claim. That means you're slumbering on your rights. And there's a maximum law that states that he who slumbers on his rights has none. Makes you really wonder whose fault it is now, don't you? Anyway, while this required many years of effort, it could be done quietly without an act of Congress. That's right. because does anybody know how the Uniform Commercial Code gets amended, how it gets altered? It gets altered by the Uniform Law Commission. And if no one knows what the Uniform Law Commission, you need to seriously watch the Vocational Science of Freedom timeline class. It's on Odyssey. It's the only place I can post it because I talk too much about the Khazarian mob. But in it, I cover deeply what that organization does, where it started, who runs it, and what they've been doing for the past literally 100 years to make everything uniform. See, they're dumbing down the attorneys at the same time they're dumbing down everyone else. So they're making everything uniform. Uniform Commercial Code, Uniform Probate Code, Uniform Family Code. Guys might want to go read that one as well. All there. Okay, so it had to be done quietly without an act of Congress. These are the key facts. Ownership of securities as property has been replaced with a new legal concept of security entitlement, which is a contractual claim assuring a very weak position in the account provided becomes insolvent. That's basically just said what I said before. We'll hold the title, and maybe we'll give you a snippets of it if we feel like it. All securities are held in unsegregated pooled form, which means you don't know what anything is. You can't segregate anything from anything else. They've mixed and muddled everything together. Just like they've mixed and muddled everybody's fidelity bonds, which are connected to our birth certificates. They put them into tranches. Why? Because they don't want you to know what's actually yours, how much your estate is actually worth, how much securities they've piled onto your back, or how many Abram tanks are actually in your name. Could be a problem, right? If there was ever actually any true accounting. But guess what actually has to happen under the common law? When the heir comes of full age, he must have his entire estate without fine and without fee. And guess what? It also must be fully accounted for. Who has to do the accounting? The ones that have been doing the administration. Who's the special administrators? The black robed priests of El sitting up on the bench. And why do they have to be held to account? What are the laws that say they have to do the accounting? Might be a little thing called, I don't know, Executive Order 100. I want to go look that one up. Lincoln? Yeah. He told the entire military to do what? Put it all under the protection of the military. Put what under the protection of the military? The Republic. Okay. What's the Republic? Us. Actual title to things. Actually the land and everything else that comes from it. That's our Republic, people. It's supposed to be protected by the military. Okay. Who do you go to if the judges mess up? Anybody know? You go to the Provost Marshal. The Provost Marshal is in control of the military courts. How are these courts military? Because you can go read the DOD Law of War Manual. And it says all courts are commissioned courts. What does that mean? It means they're all military. What does that mean? It means that if the judges fuck up, they could be court-martialed. And worse off, honestly, because they're all acting as foreign agents without stating that they're foreign agents. Technically, they're all acting as spies. And spies don't get a trial. Spies get hung instantly. So anyway, just a side note to think about. All right, so all securities are held in unsegregated pooled form. Securities used as collateral and those restricted from such use are held in the same pool. All account holders, including those who have prohibited use of their securities as collateral, must, by law, I don't know by what law, not the common law, receive only a pro rata share of residual assets. Revindication, i.e. the taking back of one's own securities in the event of insolvency, is absolutely prohibited. You don't get it back. Not that they ever gave it to you to begin with. Account providers may legally borrow pooled securities to collateralize proprietary trading and financing. That's a long-winded way of saying this is what we did during the housing crisis, everybody. We created what was called mortgage-backed securities. What was backing it? Your house. What did they do with it? Yeah, they went and played with it on the stock market, their open air casino. Why? Because account providers may legally borrow pooled securities to collateralize proprietary trading and financing. What is proprietary trading? It's the creation of the funds, the mortgage-backed securities, which they then sold again and gave them a A+ rating, even though all of the mortgages backing it were all garbage and were all due to collapse, which is exactly what happened. Safe harbor assures secured creditors priority claim to pooled securities ahead of account holders. The absolute priority claim of secured creditors to pooled client securities has been upheld by the courts. That is an interesting point. And a lot of people talk about, well, I'm going to be a secured creditor. I want to be a secured creditor. Under what? I want to be a secured creditor in UCC. So they go do their UCC 1 statement. Okay. They don't even know what they just did. All they did was they created a lien interest upon their own estate. Why would you do that? First off, how can you create a lien interest on something you haven't claimed anyway? Morons. You have to claim your estate first. Then if you want to put a lien interest on it, that's fine. I wouldn't do it to the UCC though. But you just do it through 100% liability. You don't even have to lien it. In fact, liening it would be pointless at that point. Because once you have absolute title to your estate, everybody else in the world has 100% liability to you for any damages they might do to you. That's what nobody's paying any attention to. That the common law gives 100% liability in all aspects of common law. But you can't get there unless you actually have title. You are barred from the common law because you don't know what you're doing. You're all still acting as infants. You're not claiming what is lawfully yours. To continue. Account providers are legally empowered to quote unquote borrow. Empowered to borrow. How can you be empowered? That doesn't even make any sense. How can you be empowered to borrow? Pooled securities without restriction. This is called self-help. As we will see, the objective is to utilize all securities as collateral. Exactly. I assure you, this is not conjecture. You would be greatly mistaken in dismissing this as conspiracy theory, which is a common reaction to so much unpleasantness. It is possible to really know about this. Yes, obviously, it is possible to really know about this. I know about it from the law side. He knows it a little bit more from the security side, but it's about how to fix it is the issue. Okay. The documentation is absolutely irrefutable. In April of 2004, the European Commission Internal Markets and Services Director General proposed the setting up of groupthink of legal experts, meaning attorneys, as a specific exercise intended to address problems of legal uncertainty identified in the context of considering the way forward for clearing and settlement in the European Union. Right. They already had the United States locked down. What'd they have to do there? Oh, same shit. This became the Legal Certainty Group. Legal uncertainty sounds like a bad thing, and legal certainty sounds like a good thing. Unless, of course, you actually know the true intention of the attorney. However, the objective was merely to make it legally certain that secured creditors would be empowered to immediately take client assets in a failure of a custodian. In a failure of a custodian. Custodian, right? The one that would actually have the lawful capacity to hold for the heir. That's a custodian. Okay. None of these attorneys are acting in lawful capacity as custodians. Not for the lawful heirs, not for us anyway. They're holding it all for their masters so that we never get it. That's the whole point. In March of 2006, Deputy General Counsel for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York provided a detailed response to a questionnaire prepared by the Legal Certainty Group, which was looking to the Fed to tell them exactly how to do it. The following are excerpts from that response, which is also included in full in this book's appendix. Question, EU. In respect to what legal system are the following answers given? New York Fed. This response confines itself to U.S. commercial law, primarily Article 8 and parts of Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code. The subject matter of Article 8 is investment securities, and the subject of Article 9 is secure transactions. Article 8 and Article 9 have been adopted throughout the United States. Right? Remember what they told you above about the UCC? Question, EU. Where securities are held in pooled form, e.g. a collective securities position rather than segregated individual positions per person, does the investor have rights attaching to particular securities in the pool? New York Fed. Answer, no. The security entitlement holder has a pro rata share of the interest in the financial asset held by its securities intermediary. This is true even if investor positions are segregated. So even if they did segregate it and do a full accounting on it, they still don't give it to you. Why? It's because of the rest of the presumptions that everybody that is part of the VSOF already knows. EU question. Is the investor protected against the insolvency of an intermediary? And if so, how? New York Fed. Answer. An investor is always vulnerable to a securities intermediary that does not itself have interest in a financial asset sufficient to cover all of the securities entitlements that it has created in that financial asset. Meaning, if we overbet on our bets in our open air casino, you're all vulnerable, basically, is what that meant. If the secured creditor has, quote unquote, control over the financial asset, it will have priority over entitlement holders. If the securities intermediary is a clearing corporation, the claims of its creditors have priority over the claims of entitlement holders. And I'm going to pause right here for a second. This single answer right here. I'm going to read this again. If the securities intermediary is a clearing corporation, which obviously the DTCC is, the claims of its creditors have priority over the claims of entitlement holders. Think about what they just said. Once we get our doc sets done, once we approach the DTCC as a grand jury and we say, gimme, did we not just instantaneously become a creditor to the DTCC? The answer is, you better fucking believe it. Where does that put us? That puts us on top. Not your stupid UCC1 financing statement, not your stupid claims of creating bonds out of nothing, not your idiotic ideas of creating Treasury direct accounts. No, going directly to the clearing company, the clearing corporation is who has it. The claims of its creditors have priority over the claims of entitlement holders. Pretty clear to me. Where does this end? Exactly where Q told us it all ended. At number 55. Was anybody paying any attention to what he was talking about? Or what they were talking about? No. I instantaneously knew what they were talking about. It's the second that Q said that. Q said this all ends at number 55. What is number 55? It's 55 Water Street, New York, New York. Also known, or better known, as the Tower of Power. That is where the DTCC is. And that is where this all ends. EU. What rules protect a transferee acting in good faith? New York Fed. Answer. Article 8 protects a purchaser of a financial asset against claims of an entitlement holder to a proprietary interest in that financial asset by limiting the entitlement holder's ability to enforce that claim. Right. We'll just brush you aside. Essentially, unless the purchaser was involved in the wrongdoing of the securities intermediary, an entitlement holder will be precluded from raising a claim against it. Huh. So if we, decided to do securities fraud, like we do with every single mortgage, where we never transfer the note into the REMIC and we then create securities off of it, and then no one ever bothers to come back and say, hey, wait a second, that's fraud. An entitlement holder would be precluded from raising a claim against it? Oh, so you just wrote into the UCC, you can just commit fraud. Right. Sure. EU, our shortfalls, i.e. the intermediary position with the upper tier intermediary, is less than the aggregate recorded position of the intermediary's account holders handled in practice. Answer, New York Fed. The only rule in such instances is that the security entitlement holders simply share pro rata in the interest held by the securities intermediary. So again, we're just going to split the title and you lost out. Tough shit. In actual fact, shortfalls occur frequently due to fails and for other reasons, but are of no general consequence. Really? Except in the case of the securities intermediaries insolvency. Well, they're all insolvent. So what good does that do you? None. EU question. Does the treatment of shortfalls differ according to whether there is no fault in the part of the intermediary, 2, if fault, fraud, that's the word they hate, or 4, if fault, negligence, or similar breach of duty? New York Fed. Answer. In terms of the interest that the entitlement holders have in the financial assets credited to its securities account, regardless of fault, fraud, or negligence. So they just throw all that out the window. of securities intermediary under Article 8, the entitlement holder has only a pro rata share of the securities intermediary's interest in the financial assets in question. So again, yeah, we're just going to flat out tell you that we can commit fraud and no one can do anything about it. How lovely. So what are they really doing? They're using the law merchant. The UCC is all the law merchant, and it's all the aspects of what they can do to make a point here about what the law merchant is. The law merchant is basically the common law of merchants. And I know to intermix those two terms makes me want to puke, but it is the truth. So the law merchant is the common law of merchants. Now, what have they been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years? Well, it goes way, way back. I mean, you can go all the way back and read the laws of Oleron if you want. That's the law merchant. The laws of Phoenicia Cana, those are the law merchant, right? Bible doesn't speak too well of the Canaanites. Wonder why. Yeah, something else too. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees. Remember that one? Pharaohs of the sea. Merchants, those who chant their law from the sea. To continue. That's how it works directly from the horse's mouth, i.e. the most authoritative source possible. Lawyers working for the Fed. Attorneys. Further exposure of the purpose of the invention of the security entitlement can be found in a discussion paper concerning legislation on legal certainty of securities holding and dispositions, prepared by the European Commission's Directorate General Internal Market and Services in 2012. I'm not even going to bother to read all that. I'm just going to skip it. Clearly, the European Union Delegate General International Market and Services knew fully well the above in 2012. In the next global financial panic, what are the chances that there will be much of anything remaining in these pools of securities after the secured creditors have helped themselves? Answer, nothing. You will own nothing, and you will like it. You will eat the bugs. Guess who he is? He'd be a secured creditor. There will be a game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, you will not have a seat. It is designed to work that way. Is it time to ask cui bono? Who benefits? It is certainly not the citizens who have lost their property rights who have been betrayed in this deception by their own governments. The reason given for this legislation on legal certainty is demand for collateral by quote-unquote market participants. They are not referring to you and me, the public. Quote-unquote market participants is a euphemism for the powerful creditors, Khazarian mob, who controls the governments. They have worked for many years to establish their legal certainty worldwide. And with that, I want to mark this as a place to come back to. And I'm going to read one other little snippet from another book, and that is, if anybody wants to go check it out who's part of the VSOF, you can go to the members library and go down to my Z collection of others' works, and you can then go down to Frederick Bastiat. And let's open up the law for a moment. And this book starts on page 23 of this PDF. Those of you who are members of the VSF library, and you can go download it. The law perverted, and the police powers of the state perverted along with it. The law, I say, not only turned from its proper purpose, but made to follow an entirely contrary purpose. The law became the weapon of every kind of greed. Instead of checking crime, the law itself guilty of the evils it is supposed to punish. If this is true, it is a serious fact, and moral duty requires me to call the attention of my fellow citizens to it. And with that, I will leave it for this evening. We'll come back and keep reading the next section of The Great Taking, the next Vocational Science of Freedom, Wednesday night open roundtable. And so with that, I will pause here. I hope all the rest of you had a wonderful new year. And I intend to make 2024 a year of the Vocational Science of Freedom, of bringing these books and works to you more often so that we can all be sure to read what we've been denied from the Prussian education system, particularly books like The Law and this book, The Great Taking, and others. I hope all of the rest of you have a wonderful rest of your week. And this has been the Vocational Science of Freedom Wednesday night civics and sovereignty class as a makeup. And I hope all of you have a wonderful 2024 with the Vocational Science of Freedom. Until next time, stay safe and stay sovereign.